America is staring down a problem it hasn't fully come to grips with yet. For years, the national conversation has circled around worker shortages, unfilled positions, and the endless cry from businesses that they just can't find enough people to keep the machine running. But what if the real threat isn't a lack of workers at all? What if it's the opposite, a lack of work? Imagine millions of Americans pounding the pavement, firing off resumes and refreshing job boards, only to discover there are no open doors left to walk through. That's the unsettling question now. Is the US running out of jobs? And if so, what does that mean for the way we think about work, income, and survival in the years ahead? At a glance, the economy still seems relatively healthy. Growth hasn't stalled completely, markets haven't collapsed, and the official numbers don't scream catastrophe. But zoom in on the labor market, and the warning signs are unmistakable. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has been revising job numbers down, shaving off an estimated 258,000 positions from May and June of this year alone. Employers added 250,000 fewer jobs in the second quarter of 2025 compared to the quarter before. Some economists are calling it the weakest period of job creation seen in decades, not during a recession, but outside of one. That's the part that unnerves people. We're not officially in an economic downturn, yet jobs are drying up at a pace that feels recession-like. And the numbers Americans wake up to every month tell their own sobering story. As of August 2025, the national unemployment rate sits at 4.3%. On paper, that might look modest compared to the gut punch of past decades, but it still translates to 7.4 million people who are actively searching for work and coming up empty-handed. That's 200,000 more than a year ago when the rate was 4.2%. A small change in percentage, yes, but one that reveals a labor market wobbling under strain. Drill down further, and the pain grows sharper. Long-term unemployment, defined as being jobless for 27 weeks or more, stands at 1.9 million, nearly 26% of the total unemployed. These are not people between gigs or riding out a temporary layoff. They're the ones applying, interviewing, and waiting month after month as their savings shrink and their optimism erodes. Over the past year alone, their numbers swelled by 385,000. Then there are the 1.8 million marginally attached workers, people who want jobs, are available to work, but haven't searched in the past month, often because they've lost faith that any opportunity will appear. Within that group sit 514,000 discouraged workers who've thrown in the towel completely. Behind every statistic is someone who stopped refreshing a key. Indeed, stopped tweaking their resume, and quietly concluded the economy has no place for them. This despair isn't spread evenly. Geography matters. In South Dakota, unemployment is a rock-bottom 1.9%, practically full employment. But in California, a state long celebrated as an engine of opportunity, the rate is 5.5%, well above the national average. Racial disparities cut even deeper. Black Americans face a staggering 7.5% unemployment rate, nearly double that of whites at 3.7%. Hispanic workers sit at 5.3%, while Asians fare slightly better at 3.6%. These gaps show the way systemic inequalities don't just vanish in a tight labor market. If anything, they widen when the job pool shrinks. Industry breakdowns add another layer to the picture. Healthcare, one of the few steady engines of growth, added 31,000 jobs in August alone, powered by an aging population that needs care regardless of economic turbulence. But other sectors bled workers. Federal government payrolls shrank. Mining shed jobs. The labor force participation rate, a measure of how many adults are either working or actively looking, holds at 62.3%. But that's down from 62.7% last year, translating into 1.7 million fewer workers compared to pre-pandemic levels. That drop reflects a mix of realities: parents sidelined by childcare costs, burned-out workers taking early retirement, and a surge in small-scale entrepreneurship. In 2023 alone, Americans filed 5.5 million new business applications, a record-setting attempt to carve out stability when traditional employers no longer deliver it. Meanwhile, weekly jobless claims give a rolling heartbeat of the crisis. For the week ending September 13, 2025, initial unemployment claims fell to 231,000, down 33,000 from the prior week. That might look like good news, but the insured unemployment rate, essentially, the percentage of workers still drawing benefits, remains stuck at 1.3%, with 1.92 million people still relying on unemployment checks to make ends meet. These aren't depression-level figures, but the persistence of those claims is a reminder that for many households, recovery never truly arrived. None of this rivals the nightmare peaks of the past. During the Great Recession of 2009, unemployment hit 10%. In April 2020, at the height of the pandemic, it skyrocketed to 14.8%. By comparison, 4.3% seems manageable. But context matters. Unlike those crises, this one isn't driven by a financial collapse or a global health emergency. Instead, it's a slow grind where millions are edged out not by temporary shocks, but by structural changes in the way work itself is organized. Automation, AI, outsourcing, and global labor competition. The numbers whisper a quiet but devastating truth. The American dream feels out of reach, not because the country lacks jobs entirely, but because the right kind of jobs, stable, accessible, upwardly mobile, are slipping away. Now, the easy narrative is to point at artificial intelligence and declare, well, there's your culprit. The robots are stealing the jobs. And there's some truth there. AI is playing a role. But the full story is more complicated. The shifts in employment are layered. Part technology, part globalization, part corporate strategy, and part generational shift in how and where people want to work. Let's start with something deceptively simple. Remote work. Back in 2000, the US Census found that only 3.2% of American workers, about 4.2 million people, worked primarily from home. 2 decades later, by 2020, that number had more than doubled to 7.3% of the workforce, or roughly 11 million workers. Then the pandemic hit like a wrecking ball, and the work-from-home revolution exploded. By 2021, nearly 18% of Americans were clocking in from their living rooms or kitchen tables. Some of those workers trickled back into offices as restrictions eased, but many never did. Even as of late 2023, 13.8% of workers remained fully remote. That's not a fringe group anymore, it's tens of millions of people. And that shift unlocked a global labor market like never before. For decades, many US companies avoided hiring beyond borders because of tax complexity, regulations, or sheer inertia. But remote work made geography irrelevant. Suddenly, a software developer in San Francisco wasn't just competing with peers in Seattle or Austin. They were competing with equally skilled, but often lower-cost, developers in Poland, India, Brazil, or Nigeria. The data backs it up. Revelio Labs found that between 2019 and 2025, the number of onshore hires by US-based companies grew by 16.7%. But offshore hires? They grew nearly twice as fast, 32%. And these aren't just entry-level or low-wage jobs. Salesforce and other tech giants have laid off highly paid American staff in the Bay Area, replacing them with international workers at a fraction of the cost. In 2019, only 5% of US companies were willing to hire remote workers abroad. By the end of 2020, that number had doubled. By 2022, 64% of US companies said they were either actively expanding international hiring or planning to. For American workers, that means facing an entirely new kind of competition, one where the playing field is not just nationwide, but global. Increasingly, job postings are written with a worldwide candidate pool in mind. US workers either fight tooth and nail to keep their place, or they're excluded altogether. But remote work is just one piece of the puzzle. The rise of artificial intelligence, especially large language models, LLMs, is tearing into the foundation of certain job categories. According to Coursera, it's entry-level positions that are most exposed. Clerical jobs, sales assistants, manufacturing line workers, transport operators, and retail staff. It's not that every lawyer, coder, or financial analyst is suddenly obsolete. Companies still need senior professionals to check, refine, and oversee what AI spits out. But the bottom layer, the junior staff, the assistants, the interns, is vanishing. And if the ladder's bottom rungs disappear, how do future professionals climb up? Consider the example of Microsoft. In April 2025, CEO Satya Nadella proudly declared that 30% of the company's code was already being written by AI. The next month, Microsoft laid off 6,000 workers. By July, another 9,000 were gone, about 4% of its global staff. Meta trimmed 3,600 jobs early in 2025. IBM cut 8,000 roles in HR and other administrative functions. IKEA swapped out customer service reps for a bot named Billy. And Duolingo, in a move that practically made headlines for its bluntness, announced in January 2024 that it would lay off 10% of its contractors in favor of AI translation. The company's mascot, the green owl, went from quirky meme to symbol of worker displacement. Industry insiders are split on whether these cuts are really about AI. Some, like Menlo Ventures' Didi Das, argue the layoffs are simply a way to free up cash for costly AI data centers. Others, like advisor Wes Roth, say the restructuring is less about direct replacement and more about repositioning for an AI-heavy future. Either way, the outcome looks the same: fewer people employed and more emphasis on machines. That shift is hitting young workers especially hard. Normally, there's a gap between unemployment rates for all college graduates and those fresh out of school, but it's usually modest. By early 2025, that gap had widened uncomfortably. Overall unemployment among college grads sat at 2.7%. Among recent grads aged 22 to 27, it was 5.8%, even higher than the national unemployment rate of 4.2%. And even prestige doesn't guarantee a cushion. Harvard Business School told the Wall Street Journal that 23% of its MBAs were still unemployed 3 months after graduation. For a school that usually funnels graduates directly into consulting firms, Wall Street, or Silicon Valley, that's a shocking statistic. It's no wonder people are saying, skip the 4-year degree, skip the MBA, learn a trade. Electricians, welders, plumbers, and carpenters may not sit in corner offices, but at least they work with their hands in industries where AI can't yet swing a hammer. Except, trades aren't immune either. Construction sites now feature layout robots, drywall taping machines, and automated rebar tiers. Employers want workers who are as fluent in software as they are with power tools. The skill requirements are shifting rapidly, and the training isn't cheap. Then there's manufacturing, once the heart of middle-class prosperity. Politicians have promised for years to bring back those jobs, but the reality tells a different story. Outsourcing gutted the sector, with the Economic Policy Institute estimating that the U.S. lost 3.7 million jobs to trade deficits with China between 2001 and 2018. Even if wages were slashed domestically, America would struggle to compete with lower costs abroad. And yet, outsourcing is only part of the story. Automation has been the silent job killer. Manufacturing output in the U.S. is still near record levels. In 2025, it's just 5.5% below the all-time high in 2007. But employment has cratered. In 1979, 19.5 million Americans, 22% of the non-farm workforce, were in manufacturing. By 2023, only 12 million remained, just 8.3% of the workforce. Yet the sector still generates $2.9 trillion for the U.S. economy, thanks to machines. MIT economist Daron Acemoglu found that every additional robot per 1,000 workers lowers the employment-to-population ratio by 0.2% and wages by 0.4%. Each machine replaces about 3.3 humans. Even now, manufacturers say they can't fill positions. Deloitte projects that by 2033, the industry will need 3.8 million workers, but up to 1.9 million of those jobs could go unfilled. And here's the kicker. Most new roles require advanced education. Carolyn Lee, president of the Manufacturing Institute, says roughly half of current openings demand a bachelor's degree, and that share will only grow as the sector becomes more high-tech. Manufacturing is shifting from people making things to people overseeing machines that make things, until AI starts eating into even those oversight roles. And the service sector. The jobs most Americans know firsthand, customer service, retail, food service, driving, are under siege. McKinsey found AI chatbots can slash support costs by 30%. Lyft replaced human agents with Claude AI, cutting resolution times by 87%. Bank of America's Erica bot has already handled 1.5 billion interactions. Fast food chains are pushing aggressively toward kiosks. Between 2021 and 2023, the number of kiosks installed worldwide jumped 43%, hitting 350,000. More than a fifth are in the US. By 2028, that number could double. Already in 2025, 30% of US fast food outlets have kiosks. By 2026, it's expected to be 50%. Cornerstone Capital Group estimates as many as 1.5 million fast food jobs could be replaced. Taxi drivers and truckers face a grim outlook too. Waymo's robotaxis are operational in several cities. The World Economic Forum predicts fleets of them in 80 urban centers by 2035, mostly in the US and China. Autonomous trucks could account for 29% of new mid-distance US purchases by then. Machines don't sleep, they don't need breaks, and they don't demand wages. Zoom out, and you see a clear pattern. Between 2022 and 2025, U.S. public companies cut their white-collar workforce by 3.5%, yet profitability held, or even grew. 1 in 5 S&P 500 companies shrank their headcounts between 2015 and 2025, but still improved financially. The mantra has become, do more with less, or in this case, do more with fewer humans. Some optimists argue this could usher in a post-work utopia, where robots handle production and humans live on universal basic income, UBI. In theory, that sounds appealing. A guaranteed paycheck for everyone, more time for family, hobbies, and maybe even chasing passions like painting, learning French, or starting a podcast. But in practice, UBI is financially daunting. Mark Joff of the California Policy Center calculated that even a modest UBI of $2,000 per household per month would cost $2.3 trillion annually. Eliminating all current federal, state, and local welfare programs would save $810 billion, but that still leaves a $1.4 trillion shortfall. And $2,000 per month isn't nearly enough when the average US rent alone is $2,100. On top of the math, there's the cultural resistance. Americans have long tied self-worth to employment, the idea that you are what you do. That's why the very first question at a dinner party or networking event is, so what do you do? A society where work is no longer central to identity would demand a radical shift in mindset. Some people might thrive with newfound freedom, but others could spiral into depression or anxiety without the structure and purpose that jobs, even mundane ones, provide. It raises a question. Are we ready for a world where labor isn't the backbone of daily life? Then there's the political hurdle. Implementing UBI isn't just about writing checks. It's about deciding who qualifies, how much they get, and what strings, if any, are attached. Opponents would argue it rewards laziness or fuels inflation by flooding households with cash. Supporters counter that UBI could replace inefficient welfare systems, reduce poverty, and stabilize the economy in times of automation-driven job loss. Both sides have valid points, but the debate isn't just economic. It's deeply ideological, touching on what we believe about fairness, responsibility, and the role of government in people's lives. And even if the money and politics somehow lined up, there's still the question of inequality. A flat $2,000 per month sounds decent until you realize it buys vastly different lifestyles in, say, rural Mississippi versus San Francisco. Without careful adjustments for cost of living, UBI could unintentionally widen existing divides, offering real relief in some areas while barely covering groceries in others. Critics worry it would create a two-tiered society, one where some can use the income as a safety net to pursue innovation, while others remain trapped in survival mode. In other words, even utopias can have fine print. The other problem? Taxes. UBI requires revenue, but in a future where fewer people earn wages, tax receipts dry up. In theory, the government could heavily tax billionaires and corporations benefiting from automation. In practice, that's unlikely. The top marginal tax rate has fallen from 92% in 1953 to just 37% in 2023. And politicians show little appetite for taxing the same wealthy donors who fund their campaigns. So where does that leave us? Likely with millions left behind, people who did everything right but find themselves obsolete in an economy that doesn't need them. And when masses of young, underemployed people collide with a tiny elite of hyper-wealthy AI barons, history suggests unrest is inevitable. After all, if Amazon, Walmart, and Apple cut 90% of their workforce, who's left to buy their products? An economy can't run on trillionaires alone. The US might not just be running out of jobs. It could be running out of ways to sustain its social contract. And unless there's a massive rethinking of what work means and how wealth is shared, the future may not look like a utopia of free time, but a dystopia of exclusion. One possible outcome is a surge in grassroots movements demanding redistribution, not unlike the labor uprisings of the 19th and 20th centuries. History shows that when economic inequality stretches too far, the streets eventually become the stage for change. Whether through protests, strikes, or even digital age boycotts, ordinary people may push back against a system that funnels wealth upward while leaving entire generations adrift. This wouldn't just be about wages anymore. It would be about dignity, relevance, and the right to participate in society. Another potential path is a fracturing of the political landscape. Parties may split, new ones may emerge, and the old left versus right dichotomy could be replaced by a clash between those who control technology and those who are controlled by it. You might see strange alliances forming, libertarians teaming up with progressives, or conservatives joining hands with radicals, all united by the shared fear of being locked out of the future. If politics is downstream of economics, then a jobless economy could rewrite the entire script of American democracy. And let's not ignore the psychological toll. A society where millions feel unwanted by the economy risks spiraling into despair, addiction, or violence. Humans aren't just wired to seek survival. They crave purpose, recognition, and belonging. Take that away, and you don't just get unemployment lines, you get a crisis of meaning. Some might turn to virtual worlds or digital escapism, while others lash out in real life. The danger isn't only that people won't have money, it's that they won't have a reason to get up in the morning. And no economy, no matter how automated, can function when hope itself runs out. At the same time, there's the looming question of how communities will adapt on a local level. Cities that once thrived on industry or services could hollow out, leaving behind ghost malls, shuttered offices, and neighborhoods where opportunity feels permanently extinct. Yet, some regions might reinvent themselves through cooperative ventures, local currencies, or shared resource systems, almost like a modern spin on Depression-era survival tactics. Whether these efforts succeed will depend not just on technology, but on the willingness of people to build solidarity instead of retreating into isolation. Finally, the global implications can't be ignored. If America, historically the land of workaholics and the self-made dream, stumbles into an era of mass obsolescence, other nations will be watching closely. Some may see opportunity, attracting disillusioned workers to start anew abroad. Others may fear similar unrest spreading across their own borders. In this way, the crisis of work in the US won't just be a national issue. It could ripple outward, reshaping geopolitics, migration, and the very meaning of prosperity in the 21st century.